Kia ora tātou, Nissan Bulubanaka. My name's Tulia THOMPSON, and I have the great pleasure of hosting a conversation between two poets this morning, Essa RANAPIRI and Eileen Miles. Welcome to the 2 to the power of 5, the power of queer words, which is brought to you by Same But Different Aotearoa's only LGBTQI rainbow queer literary festival. They do great events. Same would like to thank Creative New Zealand for their kind and generous support, which has made this festival possible. So I'll introduce the poets who may already be quite familiar to you if you love poetry and if you love writing more broadly, and also especially if you love political poets. Essa RANAPIRI is Ngāti Rokoro and Ngāti Takatapui and Clan Gun, and is a poet from Kirikiriroa, Aotearoa. They're a graduate of the IIML's 2017 Masters in Creative Writing course. They are a firm believer in collaboration and have produced multiple scenes with other artists and writers. That's my dog, Lucy. Their first collection of poems, titled Ransack, was longlisted for the Ockhams in 2020 and was just absolutely stunning. They are the featured poet in Poetry Yearbook 2020 by Massey University Press. They write for their tipuna to speak and for their mokopuna to read. And bear with me. Eileen Miles came to New York from Boston in 1974 to be a poet, subsequently a novelist, public talker, and art journalist. And their 22 books include For Now, an essay talk about writing from Yale Press, which is forthcoming, Evolution Poems, Afterglow, a dog memoir, which is absolutely absolutely amazing piece of writing that we'll probably talk more about. 2017 reissue of Cool for You, I Must Be Living Twice, and Chelsea Girls. They showed their photographs in 2019 at Bridget Donahue NYC. Eileen is the recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship and an American Academy of Letters, Arts and Letters Award in Literature. Why did I not think about my dog? And
Okay, don't worry about the dog.
An Andy Warhol Creative Capital Arts Writers Grant, 4 Lambda Book Awards, the Shelley Prize from the PSA, and a Poetry Award from the Foundation for Contemporary Arts. In 2016, Miles received a Creative Capital Grant and the Clark Prize for Excellence in Art Writing. In 2019, they received an award from the American Academy of Letters and Arts. They live in New York and Marfa. That's these two lovely poets. Good morning to you both, and good Saturday night, I guess.
Hey, yes.
It's lovely to have you both here.
It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, I know. Here, it's so great.
Yeah, yeah. No place.
Yeah. This weird in-between space. Yeah. So do you want to, I thought maybe we'd start with the the readings, because that might be a way of easing our listeners into your work, and then we can kind of talk a bit more about craft. Does someone who wants to read first? Someone want to read first?
I can.
Yeah.
I guess. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Sure, thanks.
So I'm gonna read two poems that I had figured out what I was reading, and now I feel less sure. Oh wow, this was a good start.
Just know I feel the same way. I was like, these are the wrong poems. Always.
Oh. Okay, we're going to read one short poem from Ransack and then another longer poem that hasn't been published yet.
Right.
In the material body of the writer, the maggots form a chorus, mincing strokes of tremoring noise. Get the fuck out of here. It's too dark to see you thinking with all your constellated nervous system. I lust for the shade of your hands over my meadow, your fingers to take my clearing and fill it with a meat that likes to touch my eye with its little button of ink hovering above the straight and noble stick to me. The fetus of an idea forms, gets its hands on the chemical storm and buds under the ground. It has a tongue. It has a tone off that tongue. It has, all it has got is itself. Maybe three poems. Yeah. This is a poem called A Mongratitude of Love for You, and it's after Julian Talamantes burlesque, and kind of how they play with words is like really inspired by like poetry as play. Yeah.
Right.
It festers fine like leopard print gorgons, rushing in with twine. It bitters mincy, while on limes shiver. The carton gone ratty, the rat's gone quiet in the hull. Where do you go into the dusty place? The babble screams, xylophonic into the wind. Their whole heart is bitter, is smitten, is the pinprick lick strapped to a can of divine elixir. The beauty of arriving, the smudge of dragon poop on the wheel. Jesus, I caught you crying. Their scaredy cat chorus rubbles me through one. What words can be used? What words would you use me with? Be careful with the sword you're swallowing. Be towel wrapped in dignity. What the fuck does triumph paraded mean? Never mind. The bombings, the fish on the line are tugging, a waltz of please, just leave me. Gimmick in a mine of my own faking. Thrusters, the stars are courteous, the stars give no water to drink. When I misheard the lyric, the water left to ask God for forgiveness. I fucking hollered. I lowered myself into the soap. I did for something to do. I would love to be done well in the boil-up pot at the end of Rainbow, where I get to look over my friends who I love with all of my spare parts and go, fuck, what is this luck? Regulate me. Their stomping grounds is popping, their hope for a future is magnificent, with horns on. And one last one. It's called Not Boy 2, in which the non-binary individual bludgeons the reader. An open space where, not here, not boy, that's me, sat behind the turbine of brain exposed to water ungalvanized. It turns how I turn in a dress, sat behind a counter with gabble asking questions like these questions. What kinds of jokes spin and focus behind their mouths? It's telling. They're telling me it's not all right to be wood clap on wood. If they see me alone, I am gay man or transvestite or drag queen. If they see me with you, I am straight man or nothing else or lying to myself. The beetle pushes shit along the ground. It knows this to be true because it feels the object on parts of itself. It makes to move. It tells itself it smells nothing. My body is something I would like to see in writing, that flat, imperfect, and dead. I cannot be myself without verbal communication, but my mouth is turned inside out, donut, metered inadequacy. Walk down an aisle at countdown, hold up mixed veggies under the light, what nutrients are left in frost, people passing from the rotting avocados, black and soft, with fresh baked bread held in sheaves of cardboard. A look that shakes my spine, a look on so many different faces, but still the same fucking stare, a snare that hooks the lip of a smirk that highlines the forehead. Wet sores battling themselves out, chains clacking to the ground when we realize the door is unlocked and a corpse is holding it closed, when they realize they're utterly outnumbered, way too late. Severed ideas floating back into a vacuum where nothing is written and nothing lives. The sun screams with no air to carry its screams. I speak with nothing to carry my. The stars are all out of their comfort zones here. A clatter, a tear, and the eye drop in the ravenous gloom, and the tiding of dust, smoke, and the memory of burying itself alive to feed the earth a story. How could you miss it? A whole fucking tree. Trick question, is a tide coda or a code to crack before the chemical hit? It takes the sky on the polish of promise, leading a bull on a leash made of tissue paper to the very center of the circle, where there any place could be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. And now me, eh? I have a bunch of sort of newish ones, and then, okay. Did you indeed dance under a tree with goats in the dark? That's sort of a rhetorical one. That's it. This is cool and bright. I stand up as I do in my poet's shack and piss the toilet's black. An orange moth does its last couple of flaps, flap, flap. Pissed to death. It could be no worse. You flew. They printed that in my local paper in Marfa, Texas. I think people were really weirded out. They kept going, the toilet was black? And I thought, that's not the part you're wondering about. Sorry. This is called The Sacrament, and the train's coming today. From yesterday, there still is that slight breeze. Maya is the special agent in charge of casinos on Get-Go and not the owner of Ozark, who did not respond to my letter, peeing around the dumpster, peculiar slime and cat trap, a cup of time we get to give as an amend to somebody else, not burning in this morning sun today. I'm starving. This one has no title. It's called My Watch is Back, but I don't look at it anymore. The kitten in the dream is probably dead. The writing's so cool, Eileen in motion. One thought floated to the next, swarms of it. If I were recording, go home to the place, it is possible, replaceable, one word, butter. They move with the seasons. I don't, I thought. The leverage of their desire could be mine. Get out, the child in here wants lawns and furniture, big window and a dog, books, she lovers, rooms to wander and then sit and write a lot, throw your apple in the trash. This one is called Painting is the sky. That's not a new thought, and every single thing you built is a perch, 6 black crow, and 1 tiny bird on a wire says whatever. We own the sky, and half of us cat our blackness over there. The orange and pink and yellow where the road ends and it doesn't end. Mountains fill the view and disappear. When night falls, what's that word about gathering the future? The dog's revenge is when I'm done. She's sniffing something and chewing hard, and the cars breathe. Jesus dumpsters, nothing's left. Where's you? And this is April 16, 2020. Open the window to sunset. Let the light in, that bird that read. Elise is 40. The poverty of my house is I have no view, no mountains, and dusk. I simply come, and having seen all that, and I open the window and it breathes me. And this is the last little guy called Time Today. I think this is very COVID. I sit down to tie my sneaker. Honey is my dog. I sit down to tie my sneakers and honey floods and flows to my other side. I'm unwrapping time today. No, I'm rewrapping it. It's been loosed and I need the strictures back because fear is out there in its ambling tooth. That's it.
Thanks for reading. One thing I've been noticing as I've been reading your poetry, both of you, is there's a lot of this code switching between kind of the vernacular and it's something that you both use very powerfully in your writing, and then you both kind of shifted up to these sentences that are kind of a bit more like feels like it kind of grabs onto the sacred and then it kind of code switches back to vernacular. And I just wondered if you wanted to both talk a bit about that. Does that?
I guess for me, I think I don't trust either.
Okay.
You know, I think in the way the vernacular is where I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, and even then it wasn't that clear. Like my mother was a Polish immigrant, so she was always about using correct English.
Mm.
But the people next door who were maybe slightly more working class than us used all kinds of language, and I found them very exciting. And then I read a lot, and the kids in books used lots of different kinds of vernacular too. And there was white English and black English. And so there was so many Englishes right from the get-go. And then I moved into the poetry world in my 20s, and I felt there was a very strong class experience. People seemed to come from a more middle-class background than me. And also there was a kind of classicism in poetry that was always getting thrown over, and yet we all have our own private affiliation with it, you know. And so I have my own date with formalism too, and even classic themes. And so for me, it's sort of like it winds up being about the body. Like it feels like I'm kind of writing a poetry that is a dance of all those different languages. And trying to find comfort in any language. And I think part of the reason I'm a poet is I'm obviously making up my own language, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting.
No.
Yeah.
Essa.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, like same. I feel like as a poet, you're making a nest out of all these different kind of words and ways of talking that like represents something to do with who you are. And we're all very, we're all full of all these tensions between different ways of being and ways of talking and seeing the world. And I don't know, I just really like how there can be like a sense of relief when you code switch or like move to a different way of speaking in a poem. So like you're like reading this poem, which is all this very like delicate and beautiful language, and then someone like just tells you, get the fuck over yourself in like the middle of this quite beautiful thing. And I like playing with that, I guess, switch up
Yeah.
I don't know. I enjoy that a lot.
Exactly what you just said, that thing where I feel like if I'm writing a poem and it's getting too beautiful, I almost involuntarily will say fuck, you know? It's almost like in order to keep claiming the poem as mine, it's got to do something a little vulgar so that I can keep going in a way.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and of course, both of you write in, like, you know, sometimes a very I want to say confessional, but I feel like you would both hate that word. Confessional way, you know, very much like, this is the reality of my body, this is the reality of who I fuck, and this is the reality of what's going on for me. And at the same time, like you know, kind of, yeah, move between this very kind of intimate version of self and the political, and there's a line in one of Essa's poems that the poem is called, it's just a beautiful example of this. The poem's called "My Tongue is a Rope," and so they're at times in the poem they're talking about, I can see a trail of blood puddling in the footprint. So it's very much with the South, but they also have this stunning line, "The Endeavour hits the land," which is of course a reference to the colonial ships that colonized Aotearoa. So it's you kind of, there's this kind of double punch, I guess, of the body alongside colonization kind of thing, which is kind of something your work does as well, Eileen, of like, of kind of moving between the body and sex and the political process in the States. Yeah. Sorry, that was my long ramble about it.
And then also the history of poetry, you know, which kind of in some ways told me what it was, and then and then you keep throwing that over, because I feel like even though, like, poets of the New York School, even though they were so vernacular in a certain way, were still actually pretty indirect around sex and sexuality, you know, which I would have to say I didn't really mind. I mean, I think one of the funniest poems John Ashbery wrote is a poem in which he said, I let a guy, he's playing a straight man, and he goes, I let a guy blow me once. It wasn't really a bad experience. And it's so funny because it was this totally ironic. I mean, everybody knew John Ashbery was gay, and for him to pose as straight in a poem and be this sort of, you know, but it's, again, by the time I was writing in the 70s and 80s, I wasn't going to be that indirect. It was, you know, I came up with in a different generation. And yet I think that's an interesting challenge too, about what to say and what not to, like, you get invited to speak or read and you're like a political poet. And one of my favorite readings in New York was this annual event called the Rainbow Book Fair. And it was like it was a gay LGBT book fair event, and the people who organized it didn't have aesthetic, you know, even though we could all be LGBT, we have such different aesthetics, right? And so the person who organized didn't pay attention to that at all. They just invited everybody. And what was really interesting was to see all these different kinds of poets of all different classes respond to the invitation to be gay, you know? And people were so surprising, because somebody would write about a sunset and somebody else would be butt fucking, and somebody else would be very political, and somebody, I mean, it was lovely to see everybody be uncomfortable and comfortable as a collective, you know, because it's very funny to be known and then to expect to deliver, you know, and what do you do with that too?
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Essa?
I was just thinking about just that when you're invited to a thing based on, you know, one aspect of your identity, and then they kind of let you do whatever you want. And then, and yeah, just like that, the like subversion of expectation. There seems to be, I don't know, there seems to be a trend in expecting maybe, you know, that sunset poem more often than the, you know, abolish prisons poem or something like that. Which, you know, all these experiences are, you know, coherent with being queer in the world.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, that's so true. Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, so yeah, maybe if you could kind of like it kind of leads into this question of that I had thinking about both of your work of the way that writing evolving selves, and that's been kind of a feature of your work. And so yeah, I wondered if you could say something about what writing the self means to you, or yeah.
Do you want to start first? Essa, you look ready somehow.
I don't know. I guess the self is always evolving, or at least I don't know. I feel like it's like this almost like a treadmill. You like write about yourself, and then you read what you've written about yourself, and you're like, oh, I didn't really know that. And so I guess it's just part of this I don't know, ongoing process, because we're always changing, we're always responding to different things in the world, and I don't know. I don't know if I still am, but I was really interested in like being as honest as possible. But I think that there's a whole lot of stumbling blocks in even thinking about honesty and what is honest and what is truth within writing, when, you know, you're like abstracting out or, you know, turning things into metaphor. And I don't know. I guess people change, so I'm writing that change. Is the most simple way I can put it. And it's interesting to see where that journey goes, and letting poetry kind of take the lead on that is something that I don't know. It's the reason why I really like writing. Is because you can it gives you the opportunity to change a lot more than I think other social settings might. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think as for me as a younger person, I feel like it was how I think in many ways was constructing a self. You know, I mean, I had such a amorphous idea of who and what I was, and scarily so. And so in through all that time, and I'm thinking like early 20s and even younger, the struggle to write was the same as the struggle to become. And I think even though I was as interested and still am in writing, you know, prose and longer works and novels, the thing about a poem was that even though I didn't know who I was, I might know for a little while. And in that short while, I could compose something. The prospect of completion and wholeness seemed to always loom in a poem. And it seemed to be, I would have these moments where I would be struck with either some language or a realization or a vision of some sort. And I could get that down. And even if I would still walk away not knowing who or what I was, I had this proof, you know, and that was so great. And I think what was interesting for me was that prose had a whole different, I mean, I couldn't write anything longer well into my 30s, even 40s, because the problem was that if I wrote, I had that one good day and I would write that stuff. And then the next day, it was like somebody else would return to the typewriter. The person who came the next day was not the same person. So I thought, who could keep writing for me? You know, and it wasn't until I found writers who suggested that I didn't have to show up as the same person, and the writing didn't have to be composed as a continuous series of moments, but a more accumulative thing. And the effect of even prose could be something that kept changing. and that change was acceptable, which wasn't acceptable for me as a younger person. I wanted to know who the fuck, I was, and I just, the newer, longer, or by now not so new work was not at all, those were not the questions. The question was more how to stay in motion and how to keep composing rather than who am I?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's become less about an identity and more about a composition, I guess.
Recently I interviewed a painter called Jack Trollov, who's a trans painter, a trans guy, and his latest collection was this series of kind of beautiful portraiture, but it's very kind of abstract, but he kind of draws out these features of the kind of eyes and teeth that are with these very kind of hyper real kind of aspects. So when I was interviewing him, I was kind of asking what the connection was to his gender identity, and he was kind of saying, well, it's nothing as linear as that. It's that my paintings are about the state of in-betweenness, but that's the world that I inhabit. And so I kind of thought, like, that kind of spoke to me in terms of both of your writing, and I was kind of wondering what you thought about this kind of idea of kind of writing from a state of being.
These two beings are looking at each other, seeing which being will take that. I mean, I don't know. I think I would say for me now, that is the challenge. I just feel like I'm working on a new book, and I feel like I keep stepping into territory that feels like I already wrote that, and sometimes it's I already told that story, but also there's just a sense of things that I feel like I have left, and here I am recomposing it again. And even and certainly even in my own story, like I was trying to do a quick encapsulation of periods of my life, and I realized that the in-between parts I was both dismissing but finding very interesting. And I realized that my account was about to say that then I realized, like this more in-between period was resolved by this realization of something about my sexuality. And what was offered to me in the 70s was to be a lesbian. And so I thought, so I was going towards telling that story, and suddenly I thought, obviously that was what was offered to me culturally rather than what I knew and felt. I just didn't have language for what I knew and felt. And I thought that the point was to get out of that in-between place and not keep wandering, and I feel like in some ways what I'm struggling with right now is that I'm really interested in that unresolved place. And I'm really interested in saying what the wandering has, and enumerating it. And it's much harder. I almost, as I say this, I almost don't even know what I'm talking about, but it is kind of the problem of my writing, is if to not repeat the past, you have to understand both it and the present in a different way and in different terms, and a different language. I guess that's what I'm struggling with very much in my writing now. It's if somebody asks me to write something, it's like my next book it's called For Now, and it was part of it. Like Yale had this series of books called Why I Write, and they gave me a lot of money to come and give a talk, and I was giving the talk on an occasion at which a lot of other people were getting a lot more money than me. There was people who were receiving an award, and then they would have the famous writer come and give the talk about writing. And so I thought it was a really good gig till I realized that more than the 1 hour talk about writing, I then had to write 13,000 more words. And I thought, I already said it. Oh no. And I had to writing the book. But still, I kind of knew what they wanted in some way, and I could do it in an Eileen way. And so there was a form. And I find that it's very weird to realize that right now I'm so comfortable when somebody asks me for something, because the problem is my own request is much vaguer, you know, and even in earlier books, I had decided, you know, this book is about, this is about a dog, you know, and this is about, you know, being here and being here and being here. And even when I wrote Inferno, I was using Dante, you know, and suddenly for the current book, I think I know what I'm using, but I think it's undermining me a lot. And I feel like I'm talking about a different time and a different state. And it just, and I probably can't say anything more about it than that. So the in-between is of utmost interest to me right now, both I think in terms of gender and collectivities that meet and and relationships even, you know, so Essa.
I definitely feel that drawn to the in between and like the interstice, I guess. And I think a lot about the kind of, I know, the stories, the traditional Māori stories about how the world came to be, and how in a big way we're in between two great bodies, Papatu and Nuku and Sky Father and Earth Mother. And then even before that, there's the space of Te Kore Kore, which is the space of potential. And I like to think about those concepts because they, I don't know, they seem to universalize for me the space of in-betweenness, and how we all have come from, you know, a space of potential and a space of not knowing what or who we are. And I feel like, I don't know, there's a scariness to trying to live in that space, but also I think a lot of comfort. And yeah, I don't know, I talk about like space and place in the Not Boy poem I just read, and that's the kind of space I'm talking about. And I feel like, I don't know, even this conversation takes place in a space and a not space at the same time, because we're all, you know, in our own rooms in very separate geographical places, but we're also on the screen together. I find that there's all this in-betweenness everywhere that people seem to want to refuse or deny, and I think there's a lot of value in accepting it and recognizing it. That's my take.
No, that's great. And I think which I think you were leading in, pandemic time is such a huge not knowing, you know. And I mean, it's sort of thrilling in a way to not be able to plan so much, and also to not travel. I mean, I just love that I'm in New Zealand tonight, you know, and I just felt like, and then I'm, you know, and a friend of mine got married, a couple, they got married recently, and they said it was so great because they formed this beautiful ceremony and people from all over the world came, and then it was over and they made lunch, you know, and it just, something as simple and wonderful as making lunch seems like very real time. And then so much else is just completely unpredictable, and it's just like we're on this sea that we don't recognize. Yeah, and and it's sort of like, is this the present or the future?
Yeah,
it's very strange.
Yeah, I have another kind of poetry geek type question for you both. Which was just that I feel like part of me thinks this is such a self-indulgent panel. Like I really hope that it's like, I hope other people are like not just like, it's Tulia being like such a poetry geek. But like one thing that I was thinking about while I was reading over your work, and thinking about this kind of in-betweenness, is that sometimes in both of your love poems, or what I interpret as love poems, maybe you interpret them differently. You're talking to a you, and the you isn't like is fairly sparsely sketched out. Like it. Okay, I'm gonna Eileen's poem Peanut Butter, which is kind of very famous. Like has this kind of line about liking kind of not the fancy flash peanut butter, but the on the shelf peanut butter, but also is kind of talking about this you that Eileen has known for a long time, and it's there's a kind of a gentle love element, and it kind of reminded me of S's poem, The Sparkle in Your Eyes versus My Dysphoria, where Essa ends the poem saying, "You blow on my fingers and I feel your breath in the soft gaps that I am trying to live in." And I thought, what is it? There's something interesting about evoking this you that is very much in relationship to myself. So it's like a poem about who I am, but in relationship to this love. And the other, in S's poems, where the kind of loosely love poems, it's also the moments in Ransack where you kind of experience the most tenderness and joy, maybe. So I wondered if you wanted to say something about writing to a intimate you.
Mm-hmm.
Should I go first?
Would you please?
Yeah. I don't know. I think, well, simply I was just very in love when I wrote the book. So the you is a real person, is my partner. But there is also a sense that I don't know, the self isn't just one person. The self is how we interact with other people. And so the you, I guess, like technically is an actual other person, but is also, I don't know, a way of talking to the self. And it just, you know, like is the I and the you and the we, and they can all be like the writer in a way. I guess it's, you know, to authors the right characters. You know, all the characters come from different aspects of the person writing. But yeah, I definitely wanted the book to have something of that feeling, because it's quite a, I don't know, there's a lot of places where it kind of pushes back against the reader in ways, in terms of like meaning or clarity. And I don't know, I wanted to also have, I don't know, that tenderness and the body that's very present in those poems, and in my life, I guess, be represented in some way. Yeah, there's a lot you find out about yourself through intimacy with other people, I think, that I wanted to explore. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I certainly know there's something. So when you're like newly, or even just returning to a feeling of joy or ecstasy, or a different level of intimacy with someone, this thing that I'm always doing, which is always writing a poem, kind of quickens. It almost seems like, it sort of always seems like the point, you know, when I actually, whether I use a you or not, the fact that there is a you, or there feels like a you, is why I do this. I have to admit, you know, and whether it is like prayer or God or devotion or incantation, it's just like, it's what I need, you know. I mean, I feel wary of it, like say later in a relationship when I feel like I'm just using them again, you know. And it's just like, it's you know, like it sometimes feels a little like a cop out in a way, because it's you know, because I think it is kind of like you're getting excited, and the you is, I mean, really asking for the you to hold me in that moment. because I'm it's like I'm losing control. I'm excited and I'm losing control, and I'm doing it with you, you know, and it feels like such a exciting, scary moment. I think when, you know, like it certainly, because I just feel like I love what you said, Essa, about like the great answer to the in-betweenness was somehow to go back to the beginning and to talk about creation myths and like even how did this get to be here, you know? But most of the time you're simply here, and I feel like it's always a creation myth in a way. I feel like it's always this constant inventory of where I am, and yet if there's a you, then I become liberated. You know, it's like the weight of the self seems to be so jettisoned, and I'm just flying on all. I mean, I could just be writing about anything, and I'm like, oh my God, you know, and it's because of you, you know. So that's a lot to put on a person. So I think you're not really putting it on a person. I think it's kind of, it is weirdly more, I don't know, impersonal in a way, you know, but I think yeah, can I even finish that sentence? I want to say like, I think the instrument is God, but I don't know, or the instrument is poetry, or the instrument, is love, Yeah, but it's falling apart in it, and somehow being safe in that falling apart. I think.
That's really, it's really interesting. It's it's really interesting. I'm gonna do an ungraceful segue to my political question, which is it's kind of because when I saw the beautifully written blurb about the panel, there was this line about poetry and personality, and I was like, you know, no offense to the writer of the blurb, but I was like, well, fuck personality, like. That we have to be like neoliberal selves as well as writers, fuck that. And then I was like, what's that? And like, and I was like, no, that's too, like, you know, that's like, we have to watch all this fucking cult of personality in our fucking politics. We don't have to do it as poets. And then I was like, and yet these are poets who are so, like, obviously have strong personalities, and what are you doing, Julia? But but what does it mean to be writing in this political moment and all that politics entails?
I guess I'll say things. It's terrifying, really. I don't know. I think it probably hasn't stopped being terrifying, or started being terrifying. I don't know what the word is. I don't know. We live in a terrifying economic system that one doesn't value many people who, you know, are the reason almost everything exists. And then being a writer inside that is also quite undervalued in certain ways. I don't know. I guess it's just like looking. It's just, I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it's just like looking out the window. You kind of have to acknowledge what's there. I don't know. I don't usually. I guess it's probably poetry I write that's like more clearly like political, or about like maybe even specific policy that should happen, or changes in our society that should be made. But it doesn't feel any different from like just describing the sunset, or like, because even that's political. Like the land we live on has been stolen. I don't know if I'm even answering the question.
I mean, what I really liked in your collection, Essa, was the way that you so clearly draw this line between colonization and binary gender, and the fact that binary gender is like, you make it really obvious that binary gender is part of, like, is part of, is an effect of colonization. So it's something that we're still suffering, you know. And I thought like that's really yeah. So I was just really interested in that kind of aspect of your politics as well. And I wondered if you wanted to say something about that.
So yeah, I think a lot of the systems that we live within try to naturalize themselves, you know, and they're not natural in in any way. And yeah, we don't know much about how gender was perceived or performed before colonizers arrived here. But we can, you know, assume in certain ways that it wasn't the rigid, very puritanical form that that was pushed on us. And even if there, I don't know, even if there was something a lot closer to a gender binary before, it definitely wouldn't be enforced with the same kind of prejudice. You know, a lot of, I don't know, a lot of our culture is about accepting and accepting difference and honoring that difference rather than like casting it out. With the book, I just really wanted to make it clear that these things came on a boat. They aren't present in the natural world in any substantial way. I don't.
When you say these things came on a boat, I love that sentence. But what do you, literally, what do you?
So
thing?
like I guess capitalism, the gender binary, a lot of things.
Yeah, that's great.
But like all these things are kind of enmeshed, or I see them as very enmeshed in each other. A lot of how the gender binary is enforced was about creating like a large group of creating a class of workers and then a class of people who brought up the workers, and a lot of it. Yeah, all these things feel very connected to me. With kind of like class system and the gender binary, but yeah, I want to. I at least try to draw lines between these things to make people see how kind of constructed or violent, I guess, these things can be, because for this system to be established here, a lot of people had to, no one had no one had to die, but a lot of people were killed and people were alienated from their land, and so there's like, just looking at like a forest of introduced species, and that's there's a lot of violence just in looking at those trees. You're like, oh, that's a nice, it's like a nice pine tree or something, and it came from another place, and was brought here by violence. I don't know. A lot of big ideas.
Yeah. I think another one of the strange benefits of the moment we're in is that all these systems are so exposed. It's sort of like in the States, it's so clear who's getting sick and who's dying, and who's keeping things open and who's paying the price, and who's denying globalism while feeding off of it, and it seems like you know, and I'm relieved that it's interesting. I'm relieved that I'm not traveling, because traveling, of course, is always like, when no matter what I think I'm like or what I look like or how I seem, when I get to the airport, I'm told very quickly you know, what I am and what I'm not, you know. And it was very strange to travel recently. I flew from Texas, and I think because of it's almost like because of the virus, people were too busy for that. It was like they didn't care what I was, you know. They just wanted me to get through. They wanted it to get through security, and it was a strange relief. Like, the only thing that's ever worked that way for me was America at War. I mean, inadvertently years ago, I remember I just happened to be carrying a camouflage duffel bag, and I had cut my hair really short. And I realized that even though they didn't know what I was, they thought it was military. And so they swept me through, you know? And so, yeah, I mean, I don't have to translate that into being a writer. It's just, it's how I move and my way of being on the earth, you know? And it's like, I can't not tell that story, you know, in direct and indirect ways all the time, you know? But I mean, I think we're in such a lousy time, and yet such a naked time, and it's incredible because nobody can not talk about, you know. I mean, it's just like, and I love that, you know, like, I mean, like in American politics, there are people like, you know, AOC that she was talked to abusively by another congressman. I mean, he called her a fucking bitch. And she just brought it right into Congress, and just, you know, and he apologized in that very second-rate guy way. And she was like, no, but he invoked his family. She invoked her family, you know, and it was just amazing to watch this kind of not accepting the kind of ways we have of not saying things and erasing things and trying to make everything nice. And I mean, there's nothing nice and there's nothing invisible at this moment, you know, and it's, you know, and I think that's, you know, that's always the choice, whether to make something visible or to work with how it's not visible, and which system.
Yeah, that's so true.
What works best, you know? I don't know.
Simi, our tech person, is telling me that we're coming close to the end of time, but to let people that know that we're going to run a few minutes over. We're going to run a few minutes over, and we're going to see if anyone has questions. And yeah, so just like, is that, Simi now message me if I've done the wrong thing. Is that right? Okay, good. We're good. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So, what, viewers, if you have questions, this is your moment to message in the chat thing that I can actually, questions. Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting to talk to you both about this kind of political time, because there's just it's such a comedy of errors, like watching Trump and this kind of really the kind of noxious form that politics has kind of taken because of, like, you know, because of neoliberal capitalism, and because so it's kind of a strange moment that there are these really noxious populist figures. So it's kind of an interesting time to be a poet if you think that poetry has something to do with talking to the public at the same time as popularism, you know? I don't know.
I mean, I think, I mean, both, it's so funny because when people ever say that, you know, like make claims like poets are truth tellers or something, I get I was like, no, we can't say that's who we are, you know, because we lie as much as the next human being. But I think that like, I think you said it earlier, it's just like there is a funny way in which poets are able to get out there first. I mean, we're used to being fast and quick. And as a form, when I've seen big crises politically in the country always, or in the world, it seems like it takes journalists and novelists a longer time to figure out, I think, what poets can do very fast and quick and in your face, you know?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah.
I think, yeah, we should be really careful with like saying things like poetry can do and poets can do, because poets, you know, there've been all sorts of poets who have justified all sorts of awful things with their work.
And been greatly celebrated for it. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay.
Do the people have questions?
There's a question. Oh no, it's just a beautiful. It's not a question, but it's a beautiful comment. So maybe I'll read it out. There's a comment from Lisa Salter who says, "Thanks for the opportunity. Love the line. Careful of the sword that you are swallowing. Great observation. Making something visible or work with something that is invisible."
Yeah.
Be careful of the sword that you are swallowing. Is that your line, Essa? Did you say that?
Yeah, I think it is. Or I took it from somewhere.
And there's another really beautiful comment from Billy Staples, who was saying, "You're all nourishing my soul in this fucked up world. Thank you for being you."
So we're in the praise moment. That's right.
So any just kind of final thoughts about what's next for you both, or, you know? I'm staring at Essa, and Essa isn't knowing that I'm staring at them pointedly.
I'm just writing a lot, I guess. So writing a lot of. I've been writing a lot of like reviews and like responses to things, which have found to be like a very different outlet than poetry. But I'm trying to finish the second book at some point. Of poems. That's what I'm up to.
I'm editing. My bead project keeps becoming my A project, and it's an anthology called Pathetic Literature. And because I do think that most of the work I've liked has qualities of patheticness, and I think I want to restart up pathetic, in the same way that like queer and so many terms get like reclaimed, and pathetic has always been negative and often about gender in some way. And yet so much of the work I love, I think, is truly pathetic, including my own work. And so I'm working on an anthology of that for my deadline should be at the end of the summer. So I think I'm going to do it. It seems it's very frothy and exciting right now.
Yeah, that's cool. Exciting. There's a question. What are your that's asking, what are your inspirations? What are poets you're inspired by, especially in relation to the in-between place and evolving identities? And a question, can poetry be timeless?
No. I think it has to, it always is in time in some way. And it so literally works with time, I think. Well, timeless is a tricky term though, right? But I think of it in a bad way. I don't want to, it was just like, will this stand the test of time? Or is this a timeless poem? That would just be like such a crazy thing to put on my work or anybody's. I think.
What was there was another part of the question?
Yeah, the other part of the question was, what are your inspirations? What are poets you're inspired by, especially in relation to the kind of thinking about in between places and evolving identities?
Like most of the poets I read. Cody Rose Clevedence is an American poet that writes a lot about nature and identity in really interesting ways. True Padaha, who's a Māori poet who explores identity in a lot of really interesting ways. I forgot what. They have a poem, I think it's called Inside the Paradox, or no, I can't remember the name of it, but it kind of explores this kind of I don't know, this idea of having all these like multiple kind of identities in one place that can contradict with each other. I guess it's like speaking to like the dual experience of many minorities and I don't know. I think I just started reading Coley Driscoll's poetry collection, Walking with Ghosts, and that's been, I don't know, really enlightening because they like whakapapa to a lot of different places and people. And that's my answer, I guess.
I'm very bad at as soon as I'm asked a direct question about who and what, I kind of, I just want to say that what I've got on my desk, a lot of Renee Gladman. She's a prose writer who travels with poets, and she's an African-American queer. And her work is always, it's not in between, but it somehow occupies spaces in a way that I've never seen it occupied before. She has a book called The Activist, and it seems like a series of monologues that feel like news flashes, and they're just intelligences that you never expected inside of the minds of activists. You know, it always feels very kind of organic. And his Bob Kaufman, who was the Black Beat poet. He was the poet who was famously silent for 10 years. A book called Solitudes Crowded with Loneliness. He's like sort of still an unknown and sort of unforgettable poet. A new novelist that I've discovered, Carmen Balosa. She's like my age. She's a Mexican novelist who lives in the States in New York City, and she changes. She writes historical novels. She changes selves all the time. She does that thing that shouldn't be, like she writes, uses famous characters and occupies them in ways that seem like, how could that ever work? And it does work. Like she wrote a novel about the border, the theft, Texas, the Great Theft, and it's the 19th century, and it's Texas, and it's Native Americans and Anglos and Mexicans, and everybody speaks animal. I mean, I guess I love anything in which animals speak and have dialogue and take part, and dead people. It's sort of like there are no boundaries that stand. Death and life are not solid. Man and animal are not solid. And she's like a new writer that I've sort of fallen in love with. So these are more, I don't know, these are magical writers for me and people whose work I'm newly inspired.
That's an interesting kind of thing to bring up, Eileen, in terms of thinking about Afterglow, the way that you kind of move into the space of kind of thinking through your dog Rosie's lens into the world, and you're kind of also moving between the very much the real and this kind of fantastical kind of but that is very much about kind of this intimacy with Rosie, you know.
And I think an intimacy with an animal, because we don't have language, always winds up being kind of fantastic. So it always becomes this sort of magical world. And because you're always looking into that animal's face and both accepting who they are and what they are, but then still always riffing on who they could be, you know. And it's so funny, I read a biography of Rasputin lately, which was just so crazy. And of course, Rasputin died the same day as Rosie died. And I thought if I ever knew that, I would have claimed Rosie was Rasputin as well, you know. And
Wow.
so it's like the books grow after they've been published. They keep morphing.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, it's 12, and it's been an absolute incredible pleasure talking to you both, and
Great
so
meeting
inspiring.
Good meeting you.
And and I'm so grateful, Essa and Eileen.
Yay. Well,
thank you. You've been great.
yes. Thank you.